straight here?
No, but problems are violent in the vagina.
Oh. Oh, what?
And I'm reading about this couple who married 70 years. She died.
Romeo?
He died killed the white blood cells. He's ready to go. Yeah, he's ready to go. He's at yeah, that's a tough one. Someone else.
Yeah, my
So she said that.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight for our readings of A Memory, a Monologue, a Rant, and a Prayer. My name is Zuri Brasida, and I'm the president of the Women's Rights Alliance. Alongside me is our vice president and co-director, Romeo Jackson. Before we get started, we would just like to issue a trigger warning. So each piece explores different aspects of sexual abuse that women are forced to endure. Tonight's performances are a collection of strongly emotional pieces that involve violence, rape, and suicide. However, some pieces are intended to carry humor in them. So we encourage our audience to connect with these pieces in the way they feel is right. Cry if you feel you need to cry, or laugh when you think something is funny. And feel free to step out of the auditorium if you feel like you need to take a breath. We have with us tonight counselors from NIU Victims Advocacy Services and DeKalb Safe Passage that can provide you with additional support should you or someone you know need it. Could the counselors please stand for a moment just so that people could recognize you? In the back there. And thank you for joining us, and please enjoy the show.
Hello, good evening. V-Day is a global grassroots movement dedicating to generating broader attention and funds to stopping violence against women and girls, including rape, battery, incest, and sex slavery. The truth is shocking. According to the United Nations, 1 in every 3 women on the planet will be physically or sexually abused in her lifetime. Although the sources of violence may seem varied, women's responses sound tragically similar. Besides the pain and strength you will hear in these survival stories, there are themes that resound across cultures and geographies, are the indifference of authorities, the familiar instinct of denial, and the lack of public outrage of the violence against women and girls. These readings are intended to create a dialogue and shatter taboos around violence against women and girls, to inspire and support activists who are working to create a world where women and girls are nurtured and protected through grassroots organizing, public education events, and support services for survivors, and finally to create a new opportunity and resources for women and girls. Though V-Day was born of the belief that until these things are addressed, these violations named and taken up by whole communities as unacceptable disregard of human dignity, that the violence will continue. The core beliefs of V-Day are: art has the power to transform thinking and inspire people to act. Lasting social and cultural change is spread by ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Local women best know their communities and need to become unstoppable leaders. And finally, one must look at the intersection of race, class, and gender to understand violence against women.
V-Day is an organized response against violence towards women. V-Day is a vision. We see a world where women live freely and safely. V-Day is a demand. Rape, incest, genital mutilation, and sexual slavery must end now. V-Day is a spirit. We believe women should spend their lives creating and thriving rather than surviving and recovering from terrible atrocities. V-Day is a catalyst. By raising money and consciousness, we will unify and strengthen existing anti-violence efforts. Triggering far-reaching awareness, it will lay the groundwork for new educational, protective, and legislative endeavors throughout the world. V-Day is a process. We will work as long as it takes. We will not stop until the violence stops. V-Day is a day. We proclaim Valentine's Day as V-Day to celebrate women and to end violence. V-Day is a fierce, wild, unstoppable movement and community. V-Day dreams of a world in which women and girls will be free to thrive rather than merely survive. And with your help, we can make it happen.
Words. Words. This book is indeed about words. Speaking the unspoken. Speaking the spoken in a new and viable way. Speaking the pain. Speaking the hunger. Speaking. Speaking about violence against women, not because it is the only issue, but because it is an issue that lives smack in the middle of the world and is still not spoken, not seen, not given weight or significance. So that words crack open numbness and denial and disassociation and distance and deception. Speaking so that we are in community, in conscience, in concern. Speaking about violence against women, because in 2006, young Amish girls are gunned down in their schools just because they are girls. Women are trafficked like meat, sold from poor neighborhoods to men in rich neighborhoods. Women are raped in Darfur on their way to get wood for the fire or grass for the donkeys. In 2006, women are burned and mutilated and stoned and dismissed and undone and refused and silenced. Speaking about violence, because in early November 2006, The president of Israel stepped down after being accused of rape and harassment. And a cleric in Australia blamed uncovered women for getting raped. Speak about violence against women because of your mother, your sister, your aunt, your daughter, your girlfriend, your best friend, your wife. Speak about violence against women because the story of women is the story of life itself. In speaking about it, you cannot avoid speaking about racism and domination, poverty and patriarchy, empire building, war, sexuality, desire, imagination. The mechanism of violence is what destroys women, controls women, diminishes women, and keeps them in their so-called place. Speak about violence, telling the stories, because in the telling, we legitimize women's experience. We reveal what is happening in the dark, in the basement, out of sight. In the telling, women take their power back, their voice, their remembering, their future. As part of a 2-week Until the Violence Stops festival, held in New York City in the summer of 2006, we asked a group of remarkable writers to contribute memories, monologues, rants, and prayers on the subject of violence against women. We envisioned a pivotal event in which these monologues would be performed by great actors. We thought maybe 10 or 20 would respond. We were overwhelmed with contributions. Each writer brought something so specific, so original, so Edward Albee, it could only be Edward Albee. So Alice Walker, it could only be Alice Walker. So Erin Cressida Wilson, so Michael Eric Dyson. We need writers in these terrible times of deception and manipulation and sound bites and half-investigated truths. In these times when the lust for power has trumped the hunger for justice. In these times of evildoers and saints. We don't have many real leaders. We don't have many politicians we can trust. But we can trust writers. Rather than selling us something, they are exploring something. Rather than dominating us, they are opening us. Rather than winning or having a position, they are inviting us to ask questions. We need each and every writer, each and every artist, to tell the truth the way she or he sees it, the way it comes through her or him. Some of the work in this book is funny, some mysterious, some very difficult, some devastating. All of it is new. The first time it was performed was at the festival before 2,000 people. It was thrilling. The writers in this book received no payment for this work, other than the deep satisfaction that it comes from serving the higher good. My proceeds and the writer's royalties from the sale of a memory, a monologue, a rant, and a prayer will benefit V-Day. I thank these great playwrights, poets, journalists, visionaries, for the gift of this book. And I thank you, the audience, for taking this journey.
So many stones have been thrown at me, I've lost count. Doesn't matter whether I wear this or not. They carry on raping me, my own people. In the background I can hear the distant drones. The faithful are being called to prayer. And my own president in his shiny modern uniform on a visit to your pious and devout president tells your media folk that I lied. He says my torment is manufactured. My suffering imagined. Why? Because I'm desperate for a North American passport, preferably Canadian. My tormentors now laugh in my face. So many stones have been thrown at me, I've lost count. And my Babylonian sisters in Baghdad and Fallujah, the violated women who stare with listless eyes at the walls of their wrecked homes. Some have seen their children die. Collateral damage. Do they also lie? Did they too open their legs willingly to reveal a slit where a green card could be painlessly inserted? Our voices are weak. Our pleas go unheard. but our will is strong. They tell us to stay in our caves. Live there and you will be safe. No person can see you, that he can't harm you. It's only when you reveal yourself that you expose your person to danger. Out of sight, out of mind, out of rape. We will not live like that. However sufferable our pain, however futile the wait for the dead, conscious of the international community to resurrect itself. Was it always dead? Or does it awaken only when it hears the bugle sounding the call to war? However desperate our lives, we will not disappear. We will not cave into those who occupy our country, either in the name of a religion they exploit, or on behalf of those who rule the world. Our roots go deep in every land. Without us, the world will come to an end. So many stones have been thrown at us, we've lost count. That is why we say silence is a crime. We will not stop till we are free. We will speak the truth, even if we have to whisper it in every ear. I no longer smile. A hot wind has seared my lips, but I can speak, and I will sing. Throw your stones, they no longer hurt me. Hurl your rocks, they no longer draw blood. I am not afraid.
Much of anything, I knew that I was defined by what was between my legs. I didn't know what it was for, I didn't know what it could do or what the men of the world seemed to want with it. But I knew they wanted it. There was never a mistake about that. In the beginning, I thought it was funny. In the beginning, I was flattered. All these boys listening to me, laughing at my jokes, all the attention. I was the center of their circle. They flirted, I flirted. I was free to do that, and it was fun. The air was warm that late summer night. The stars were bright and beautiful. I was giddy if not drunk. The mood was light. I was young, I was carefree, I was out, I was on. But then, their hands were on me. They were still flirting, they were still laughing. I tried to keep the mood light, not overreact, not make a big deal out of nothing. But their hands were on me. I tried to laugh as I brushed them away. Just laugh, just a joke, just having fun. But they were not laughing at the joke. They were laughing at me. I was the joke. And I was not having fun. Then, it wasn't flattering. Then, it was humiliating. I realized a moment too late the mood had shifted so suddenly that once warm summer air becomes thick and hot as their bodies encircled mine. Their hands, so many hands, were everywhere, over my jeans, over my shirt, around my waist. I was being lifted, effortlessly lifted and carried away easily by the largest of them, carried through the woods, away from those not part of this group, away from anyone who might care to stop them, carried until I was dropped without regard onto the ground. In a small clearing, I was on my back. I could see the stars. They were still bright, still beautiful, and totally indifferent to the fact that everything else but the night had changed. Again, I was the center of the circle. This time, I did not want to be. I was not giddy. I was not drunk. I was scared. I was disappointed. I was embarrassed. And then, I was almost resigned to what I knew was going to happen. At least now it made sense. Their attention, their flirting. At least now I was in a familiar context. They didn't actually like me. They only wanted to use me. This, at least, feels familiar. It's not like I hadn't had sex I didn't want to have before. It's easier not to fight. It is easier to just let it happen. It is easier, safer, and less horrible if I just convince myself that it doesn't mean anything. It's not important. If I could just pretend, inside and out, not to mind, I'd be okay. You can't rape the willing. But that was only a brief thought, because as I glanced around me at the huge, drunk, stupid men surrounding me, I knew there is no surviving this, not for me. There is no coming back from this one. I have been used before. I got over it. I was damaged already. But this was different. There was too many of them. They were too big. Had I really let my life get this out of control? This time I had something out there to look forward to, plans I had made, my second year of college about to start, a semester in London. I had to go. I had to survive this. Face it, you put yourself here. You deserve this. Endure it. Get through it. Get over it. But I knew. In my soul, I knew that I would not get over this. I felt the regret of knowing my life would end this night. These boys, these very large, very drunk, very stupid young boys would have their way with me, discard me, and move on. I would not move on. I would not get over this. My life will end here. It's like that moment when the roller coaster starts and you know there is no turning back. Whatever is to happen is out of your control, and you have no choice but to proceed. I decided then that if my life ended in these woods, it would not be because I couldn't emotionally survive being gang raped. That was too weak. If my life ended here in these woods, it would be because I fought to the death not to be gang raped. That was a death I could live with, so to speak. This cannot happen. Get off the roller coaster, do whatever you need to do, reverse the clock, stop time. This will not happen. There's no other option. Decision made? It's simple now. I fought like I had never fought before. In fact, I had never fought before. I kicked, I punched, I scratched, I bit, I spat, I pulled hair. Only twice was I coordinated enough to land a strike where it really counted, in the place that drove them. But still, I fought. I fought, and I fought, and I fought. Inside my mind, there was something screaming. It was loud. So loud, like a trapped, enraged animal. So loud, I could hear it like thunder or a train roaring through a tunnel. Loud, blood rushing, heart pounding, mind screaming. And I fought, arms swinging, legs kicking, and I fought. But only a few of them fought back. My terror, my frantic, lunatic-like flame had seemed to wake the rest back to reality. One of them said something about this being disgusting and walked away. The others stayed to watch. It was dark. It was loud. I couldn't make out what they were saying. Random words. Bitch, slut, original things like that. Then, someone said, clear as day, someone said, stop it! Just leave her alone. She isn't worth this effort. And this was heard. One sentence heard above all the yelling, all the noise. One sentence heard. I wasn't worth it. One sentence heard. And it was over. That was all it took. Just one of them said, stop. And they did. They walked away, all of them. They walked away. One of them stopped, turned back toward me. My heart stopped with him. I thought, here we go again. But he walked slowly toward me, put his hand over mine, and pulled me to my feet. He helped me up. He glanced at me quickly, then at the ground, and walked away, shaking his head. In the brief moment when he looked at me, I saw something in his eyes that really confused me. I saw fear. I laughed, and I laughed, and I laughed, and I laughed, and that was when the pain started. I was covered in bruises all over my legs and the sides of my body, mostly over my thighs and upper arms. I had fingerprints around my arms. My lip was cut. My hip was dislocated, although I wouldn't know that until the next day when the inability to walk would force me to go to a health clinic in town. I made up a story. I never told my mother. I never told my friends. I never told anyone until later, much later. I never told anyone until I realized that the story was not about something horrible and shameful that had happened to me. The story was one of liberation. The story was about the moment in my life when I decided I would take control of it. It is the story of how I came to own my body, my will, my life.
I was little, 6. Sports camp, swimming, soccer, and I can't remember what the third sports was, but I know there was one. We moved from activity to activity with tiny beads of sweat on our foreheads. It was my second day. The soccer counselor told us that we were going to play in the hockey rink. It was cooler. There was no ice. A cement oval with white walls scarred with black hockey pucks. The counselor divided us into 2 teams. It really wasn't soccer. Just a pack of children racing the ball around, screaming. Near the end of the day's session, I fell and I scraped my knee, blood gushing down my skin. Everyone stopped playing. My giant flap of skin hanging in the jagged piece of cement was better than a leather ball. One boy dared a girl to touch it. The counselor sent everyone else off to the pool and took me to see the nurse. But she wasn't there. So he did up my knee himself. Peroxide, bandages, tape, artfully applied so that I could even bend my knee without the tape pulling my skin. He told me I played well and patted me on the back. I thanked him and went home that afternoon, and I told my mother that I love soccer. The next day, the counselor had the group circle up and invited me to join him to the center. He asked how my knee was. I told him it was fine. He asked me how I was going to thank him for fixing it. I said, I didn't know. He said, young lady, you really don't know your please and thank yous, do you? How about a kiss? I told him, that's gross. He laughed and asked the group if they thought that he deserved a kiss. And of course they screamed, yes! He told me to lie down. I shook my head and told him I didn't want to. He chuckled and gently pulled me down on the yellow, sunburned grass so that we were lying next to each other in the middle of the group, like sardines in a can. I rolled away. 2 kids pushed me back to him. The counselor grabbed me, pulled my head into his, and kissed me, forcing his tongue between my lips. I gagged and squirmed. It was awful. The kids laughed. I wet my pants. The counselor turned red, grabbed my arm, pinching the triceps between his thumb and his forefinger, and dragged me to the side of the field. He told me to go home, to go get some diapers. I ran home and I told my mother that I hated camp, especially soccer, and I couldn't even find a bathroom. The next day, I didn't want to go back, but my mother insisted, promising me that she'd help me find a bathroom when we got there. I didn't tell her why I didn't want to go to camp, especially soccer. A piece of me was too young to trust my instinct, to know that kissing was not a part of the game. 29 years later, I returned to the field, and I played with this. May my daughter's first kiss, may your daughter's first kiss, may everyone's daughter's first kiss be anticipated and wanted.
Woman. To stop the violence against women, woman must stop the violence against herself. We can begin to do this now that we see a sky and not a rock, a stick or fist above all our heads. Woman, to stop violence against women, stop the violence you perpetuate against your own sister, who is a woman. Your own daughter, who is a woman. Your own daughter-in-law, who is a woman. Your mother, who is a woman. Woman, To stop violence against women, stop the violence that lives in opposition to your life, deep in your own terrorized and uncherished heart. Woman, remember who we are. Not guys, but the mother of all living. We create out of our own blood and milk the creatures who oppress us, whether that be ourselves or men. Woman, awake! Arise, stand up! Woman, to stop the violence against women, get up off your imperfectly unbound feet. We have lost the earth living on our knees.
At first, I just destroyed my own art. I'd do a painting and I'd look at it and think, right, another painting in the world. That's exactly what we need. I felt this shame about it. Plus, okay, the paintings weren't that good. They were good enough. We're loaded with good enough paintings in the world, and sculptures and installations, and you know, all that. Go to a dozen galleries, nothing much is terrible, nothing is great. It's all just good enough. You never feel like anyone died to make it. You never feel like it took a bite out of someone's soul, and the wound will never heal. So I started slashing up my canvases and breaking the stretches and burning the whole thing. I didn't want to just throw them away. I wanted them not to exist anymore, and it felt good. It felt like I'd done something. It felt like I'd done something much better than having not, it felt much better than having not made them in the first place. You can probably imagine what happened next. I just started destroying other people's art. It was a natural progression. I was onto something, and it seemed too good to keep to myself. I could walk into a gallery and take care of a painting with a box cutter in like 30 seconds. I could stop an installation in the rubble like that. Sure, you get arrested and charged with vandalism and sued and everything, but that's my art. That's a part of it. And you know, the artists don't like to admit it, but I make them more famous by wrecking their work, more or less the way a murderer makes his victims famous by murdering them. But at the beginning, I only did inanimate objects. Cops and soldiers and psychopaths were so much better equipped for the other part. And then, of course, an artist has to move on. The first few art attacks are exciting. I feel like something new, but by the 10th, it's over. So I started doing violence to myself. I started taking myself out of the world, right? Like we need another person. And well, it's not like I'm that great. I'm a shitty boyfriend, I'm pretty lazy, and it's not like I'm contributing anything to the world we can do without. It was hard. The first time, I was scared. I knew I couldn't do an ear. An ear seemed like the least painful possibility. It would have been derivative. It would have been misinterpreted. So, finally, I worked up my courage, got a cordless buzzsaw, took some Percocets with about a pint of vodka, went into one of the better galleries on a Saturday afternoon, took off my boots and socks, and cut off my left little toe right there in the middle of the room. Most of you have probably never severed a body part. It's not as terrible as you might think. Your body does this, whoa, wait a minute thing. You get dizzy, everything gets sort of hot and white, and there's this paralyzing whoosh of vertigo. But if you hold steady through that, your body kicks into what I call mode 2. Right. Your body says, left little toe's going, shut down the pain sensors, move into shock mode, and then the real pain comes later. And it's not pleasant. But by then, you've done it. You've done your art. I'm in the last phase now. It's the best work I've ever done. I had this final realization. If I really haven't done anything much for humanity, I can at least do my art in service of others. So I don't perform violence on myself anymore. I invite other people to do it. It can't be just anybody though. I screen heavily. No fetishes, no sickos, it's not about that. It has to be someone who has had violence done to them. And it's almost always a woman. Okay, it's always a woman. I've had male applicants, but I've always turned them down. It's not something I can really see happening between me and another man. The women and I, we don't meet before, but we do agree on what will happen. My gallery handles that. The first woman, I don't tell their names, shot me real carefully in the shoulder above my heart. Another woman buzzed off my right big toe, which was, as it happened, my last one. Another stabbed me in the back, right in the magic marker X, so she didn't get a lung or a kidney, and etc. It's up to them whether they want to talk afterwards or just walk away. Some do, some don't. One woman held me and cried and asked me to forgive her, which I did. One woman was so pissed off she demanded to know why I'd let her do such a thing. But it felt like she was mad at herself and me both, as if we had sex when we knew we shouldn't, like we're both to blame. I was down with that too. I'm pretty much done with the small stuff now. There's not really much more to give. So it's on to the next, and as they say, final step. I'm ready, I feel great, I feel clean, and I know this will sound funny, whole. There's something saintly about it, like I'm sacrificing my body for something greater than me. I know it's a little blasphemous, sorry, I'm not really a religious person, and as you might suspect, there's not a big client list for the serious stuff, but it exists. Women are furious, some are, and you can't imagine what's been done to them. If you're interested, ask around. You can probably find somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. I'm here, I'm ready for now.
I remember my first trip to Elmwood Avenue. The ride from my grandmother's house always took us through Highland Park. And in the spring, you could smell the lilacs as they blossomed. Highland Park was a place of great beauty, with all its flower gardens and walking trails. And although we only drove through the park, it created a euphoric atmosphere within my tiny little world as I sat peering out the car window. The euphoria passed as soon as we emerged from the park. The landscape became barren. And in the distance, one solitary building reaching to the sky loomed over us. 1600 Elmwood Avenue had a circular driveway, just as many hospitals do. And from the outside, you would have never guessed this was no ordinary hospital except for the eerie silence. There were no ambulances or people rushing out. The place was a fortress with security checkpoints and locked doors. 1600 Elmwood Avenue was a psychiatric asylum. More often than not, I was not permitted to see my mother because children were not permitted in certain areas of the hospital. However, I do remember one occasion when I saw my mother on the restricted floor, and the moments I spent with her in that room before the staff realized that a child was in the restricted area have stayed with me. The room smelled of urine and was filthy. The windows had bars on them, and the only furniture in the room was 2 metal tables with benches attached and bolted to the floor. What I didn't see when I walked in was my mother crouched on the floor in a corner. She saw me though, and when she did, she sprang to her feet in a desperate attempt to reach me, but she failed. It was then I realized that my mother was chained to the floor. My beautiful mother had been reduced to the status of an animal. She had bruises all over her body. She appeared to be foaming at the mouth. Initially, I was paralyzed with fear, but hysteria soon took over, and I was escorted out and taken into another wing of the hospital. I was taken to the rehabilitation unit, which was equipped with a bowling alley for the patients. I went from one world to another within a few seconds. The patients were happy, talkative, and well-groomed. A far cry from what I had seen on the floor my mother was on. It was as if I re-entered the park I had exited on my way there. My childhood was marred by incidents like this. It was from these experiences that I learned there existed a duality in the world of good and evil. I would spend a great deal of my life entering and exiting in these various facets. For I myself am now confined to an asylum that has been conspicuously disguised as a correctional institution.
Junior high is a God's little joke on teenagers, especially a me teenager. Fat, frizzy-haired, and the money my dad made on 2 jobs, butcher and postal service, didn't allow for the mandatory hip junior high clothes. Although I had big thighs and hair like frayed wire, I did have a great personality. And when I turned 16, I discovered my boobs. So did Maurice. Maurice drove a dry cleaner's van that belonged to his uncle that you could still spot cruising around San Diego to this day. I knew somewhere inside that he didn't deserve me, or the person I was soon to discover I was. My best friend was Lavon. Lavon was beautiful, but because she had a strict mom and I was a good girl, her mom would only let her hang out around me. Lavon had green eyes and long brown hair, and although she was white, it wasn't until years later that I realized Lavon's mom had named her a black girl's name. Lavon liked me because I was fun and funny. We did prank phone calls till we choked from laughter, some fun, some really mean. We jumped into strange guys' cars on a dare, we shoplifted seized candy. We had a blast. Lavon and I were in the 10th grade, but because she was dating Doug, who looked like James Taylor and was older than us, one night we got invited to a party with the juniors and seniors. I ironed the shit out of my steel wool hair and grabbed my Costless Imports Indian print halter dress. Yep, my boobs were here and I was gonna present them to the 12th grade boys. The party was at somebody's divorced mom's ugly San Diego apartment complex. We walked in, well, my boobs walked in first, chugging out of our Boone's Farm and Annie Green Springs bottles of cheap sugar wine. It was smoky and loud. Black Sabbath's Electric Funeral blared. Lavon found Doug, and after a flirty batting and lowering of her girl-repressed eyes, they were off making out on the orange beanbag chair. Maurice DeMaio, I do not make this name up, started walking in my direction. Maurice was a popular senior. He was most known for two things: his huge Jew fro and the fact that he drove around his uncle's dry cleaner van with DeMaio dry cleaners proudly printed on both sides. If you could see past the fro, he was kind of cute. And he had French-like features and a sexy smile. As he walked, I saw him scanning the room. Most of the cute senior and junior girls were already coupled with guys, making out, dancing, or puking. Me and my D's were standing in the doorway. I was forcing down the wine I pretended to actually like. I guess he figured this fat 10th grader with questionable hair might be an option. He strutted up to me in my rack. I seriously could not believe it. This guy who dated Maxie, a stoner cute, almost phantom-like cool girl that was way out of my league. Maurice and I talked for a minute. It was almost hilarious. He did this thing where he started talking, looking into my eyes, and then finished off his sentence staring at my boobs. Let's go for a ride. In the van, I said. Yep. We got in, despite the fact that I had to do an embarrassing hike up with both hands to get my short legs into the seat. I masked it with a high-pitched, wow, this is cool, cover the grunt that helped haul my ass into the car. He pushed in the 8-track with 3 Dog Night, and we started driving and talking. I thought, wow, he's actually talking and listening to me. Then we pulled into the driveway that led to an empty parking lot of Kmart on El Cajon Boulevard. He had his hand on my thigh, tapping out the rhythm of the song. He turned off the engine and lunged in to kiss me. I could not believe we were making out. He was smashing my mouth and jabbing his tongue in it. It was weird, but all I could think about was getting back to that party and telling Lavon I made out with Maurice DeMaio. He kept wet kissing me when he lifted his whole body and put it right on top of mine. He was hugging and pushing on me and groping at my breasts, which were now way free of the halter. He felt sweaty and hot. I kind of enjoyed the kissing and the boob stuff, but now his whole body was on top of mine, hard. I was squashed in the passenger seat. I couldn't even kiss anymore. I had tried to find an empty airspace to breathe. He was heavy, humping on me, and then started to lift my dress up. Then it all came to me in a flash. This was it. This was it. I was gonna lose my virginity in a dry cleaner's van in the parking lot of a Kmart to a guy whose hair is bigger than his head, and who probably didn't even know my name. Stop, I said. I don't want to do this. Stop. No, he said. Stop, I said. It's too late, he screamed. I will never forget that phrase. It's too late. I didn't know. Was I unaware? Did boys have some physical limit that made it impossible for them to stop? Was I going to break something in his insides? A muscle that, once they started humping and kissing on a slutty fat girl, they couldn't possibly stop without being paralyzed? It's too late. He shoved his Levi crotch on top of my underwear. No, I said. And in a moment of brilliant clarity, I reached over and grabbed the handle on the side of the van door. Maurice dropped, fell out, and smashed onto the cement parking lot floor and rolled. He didn't say a word to me on the whole ride back when he dropped me off at the party. I reached for the door handle, my savior, and got out. I went in, got Levon a tab and a bag of barbecue-laced potato chips, and walked home.
One in 3 women on the planet will be beaten and raped in their lifetime. That's more than 1 billion women living in the planet today. V-Day NIU refuses to stand by as more than 1 billion women experience violence. Tonight, we're rising with millions of women and men around the world to say, enough! The violence ends now. 1 million rising is an appreciation, an amplification, and an escalation. 1 billion rising is a global call to action. We have gathered throughout the world. 1 billion rising is a communal joining us in solidarity, purpose, and energy, showing the world our collective strength, our numbers, our unity. 1 billion rising is shaking the world into a new consciousness. We're dancing across every country, on every continent. Dancing insists we take up space. It has no set direction, but we go there together. It's dangerous, joyous, sexual, holy, disruptive. It breaks the rules. It can happen anywhere, at any time, with anyone and everyone. It's free. It requires touching the music. No corporation can control it. It joins us and pushes us to go farther. It's contagious and it spreads quickly. It's of the body. We're dancing in defiance of the injustices we and our mothers and sisters, lovers and friends have suffered. 1 billion rising is a celebration. We're dancing in the streets, in churches, in stadiums, in huts, and in our homes. We're shaking the planet today in a powerful act of refusal to let the violence continue. We're saying, no more. We are 1 billion rising. We just want to take a moment just to thank everyone for coming out and to the performers who put a lot of time into their busy schedules just to prepare for this event. Again, also our co-sponsors, which this was put together by the Women's Rights Alliance, but we had a ton of help from the NIU Women's Studies Program, Victim Advocacy Services here at NIU, NIU LGBT and Women's Resource Center, and Safe Passage DeKalb. And then also we are still accepting donations, which all our proceeds will be going to Safe Passage. And then we also have the t-shirt sales as well as chocolate vaginas. But thank you all for coming. I hope you enjoyed the show.